Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, I'm Rachel Cooke of Brandon Hall Group. I'm the host of our Excellence at Work podcast, and I'd like to warmly welcome with me today Michelle Moore, the Senior VP, Leadership Assessment and Development and Managing Director and Legacy Horn Sales and Leadership Development of Gallagher. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Well, Rachel, how are you?
Good. You have a lot of responsibilities, as I laid it out here in your title descriptions. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background with our audience and a little bit about Gallagher.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you ask my children, they would say that all I do is make PowerPoints all day, but it is a different job. So as you said, I'm the SVP of Leadership and Assessment Development at Gallagher. Gallagher is a global insurance, risk management, and consulting organization. And I work in our talent practice and lead a team of people who provide sales and leadership development support to our clients all over. We came to Gallagher as what we call a merger partner. So we used to be independent as Foreign Sales and Leadership Development. And we've been part of Gallagher for 2 years now. I'm thrilled to be here. And my journey's been interesting. And we're going to talk a little bit about one thing that I'm very passionate about today. I've worked in the professional services space for about 17 years now, but I was fortunate enough to start at a global training company that primarily focused on technology training, but I ran their leadership practice. So back in 2011, I was very engaged in the world of digital transformation because that's when we started seeing things like social, mobile, analytics, cloud all come together to change the way that people worked. So it became an interest of mine, and I've been spending the last probably 15, 16 years very keenly researching and learning about how technology can impact organizations, teams, and individuals. And excited to talk to you today about some of those things.
It certainly has been an interesting journey, right, over the years here. I've been involved from an analyst and research side of the industry, looking at, different technologies and different programs and solutions in the market and how it has evolved over the years. And, prior to Brandon Hall Group, and I've been part of the leadership with Brandon Hall Group about 14 years. And then prior to Brandon Hall Group, I was with another research and learning organization. So it was really interesting just to kind of see the shift over the years and see, some of the things that I think learning and HR struggle with continues to occur from a process or from a strategic standpoint, and really kind of understanding and being able to deal with all the demands from the employee side to the market side, and now mixed with how technology is kind of elevating us even further. It is exciting in one hand, and then in the other hand, as you know, from a leader standpoint, it can be also challenging. And I think as a provider such as yourself, and from our side of the industry, looking at it holistically and looking at it across the different solutions, how can we make this easier, right? And I think that's kind of our conversation today, is leading in this digital era, and what we can do from an analyst or from a solution perspective to help these leaders really kind of think through the noise and, apply solutions that really help them real time, and also be able to help them scale and be able to adapt and embrace the ever-changing technology that I think is constant, right? It's never going to be kind of a lull where we're just kind of waiting for what's next. I think it's going to just keep coming and keep coming. We just
I
need
think
to
so
figure
too,
out.
and it keeps getting bigger. Like if you think the first thing
Right.
we had to adapt to was using email at work or being able to search the internet, and now we're faced with things like completely changing the way we work to incorporate like generative AI into our days. So it's getting bigger and faster, and it's interesting. There's lots of potential.
Absolutely. And so from some of the work that you see with your clients, what do you see as kind of really helpful for them right now? What are some of the challenges that they're dealing with, and what are some of the solutions that can be beneficial?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I would say one of the biggest challenges that we're hearing right now in the market is that people are trying to drive adoption of some of these newer tools like the generative AI, Microsoft 365 Copilot. And historically, user adoption has been one of the reasons that technology implementations actually fail. And there's for sure, we're hearing lots in the market that it's harder than we think. It's not just a if we turn it on, everyone's going to start to use it type of scenario, that new skills are required, that change management is required, and that we need leaders really actively engaged in it. And I think that that's been probably one of the biggest gaps that we've seen. You know, I used to work at in the investment management industry, and I led the learning function for a Canadian global mutual fund company. And this a long time ago, 20 years ago, and IT used to come and say, I need budget, and I had no idea what IT did. So I just say, tell me how much you need, and go and do it. And now we work in this era, I think, where business leaders, HR leaders have to be far more educated on what I call the big T technology. So that's how are you using things like generative AI or blockchain to drive a value through either a new business model, an operating model, your client experience, or even your employee experience. But business leaders and HR also have to be really equipped to use what I call the small T technology. And that's how do you use just the basic tools that we have to communicate and collaborate. And we still hear a lot from business leaders saying, I don't understand this technology that's coming that can create value for my company. And I don't even know how to share my screen in a virtual Teams meeting. So I need a lot of help. So we're doing a lot of work with leaders right now to change mindsets, but also build skill sets.
That's interesting. Sometimes it's some of the very basic things that hold us back that, when you're so used to using a certain tool, you may take for granted what you know versus what someone else doesn't. And I think that's also another, can be an obstacle or an opportunity. It can be an opportunity for the learning organization to ensure that we are building communications, that we have a vehicle to make sure that these communications are accessible and delivered and at the right time and easy, right? So what else? Any other things that, as far as, there's just so much out there, right? Like, how do we condense this for an HR leader?
Yeah, so I mean, HR leaders have the dual responsibility, I think, right, of making sure that the organization is equipped with the right skills and that we've got people who are digitally savvy and can use the technologies that are constantly changing, right? Even if you think of something like Teams or Google Meets, the functionality that we have today is very different than it was 3 years ago, and it continues to evolve at a very rapid pace. So HR leaders have to make sure that's happening and that we're keeping pace. But they have to be able to navigate all of the different tools that are available, from things like recruitment through to onboarding and developing their talent. And again, there's no shortage, we know, of suppliers in the tech vendors, the learning tech vendor space specifically, and human capital management. So they have to be able to do those two things. I think on the side of making sure the organization is prepared, from a digital savviness and, that we've got mindsets, we're advising that some of the people that we work with and what we're seeing in the market works best is to really start by making sure that there's a good mindset regarding digital. We still see in organizations, people are afraid of AI, right? The robot's going to come and take my job, or I don't believe what it says. Quite frankly, I was really excited when the robot came to help me with my job, not take it. So I think, making sure that mindset is there and the openness is a really good place to start. And I think the organizations that are having the most success are the ones that are starting there, as opposed to just trying to skill people. Because we know that attitude precedes behavioral change. And if people aren't really buying into the fact that we need to use different tools or work in a different I think that there's going to be challenges in driving that user adoption. I think one of the things that I like to share is that it's almost like you can create a blueprint now for upskilling organizations on different digital tools, because we know the half-life of skills is getting shorter. With technology skills, it's about 2.5 years now. So that means that we're going to see this rapid change. But if you have a blueprint in place as an HR leader that says, here's how I'm going to build mindset and shift mindsets to make sure that we've got good buy-in. Here's how I'm going to make sure that we can skill people so that they understand how to use the functionality of whatever the technology is. And then that we've got a way to drive that adoption. And that's usually where we build into our programs something with the manager, because we know through research that behavior change, applying what you learn through training, one of the top ways to do that is by getting the learner's manager involved before and after training. So we do things like create meetings in a box for managers where they can have a team meeting and let's all now try and use this new tool that we've got and figure out how we're going to use it within our team. And then kind of the fourth piece of that roadmap, so we've got your mindset, you've got your skill set, you've got the adoption, is the community of practice so that you can keep learning. Because a lot of times when technology comes into organizations, it's fairly new. And we're at that point now with generative AI. And if you ask people who are using some of the newer, very sophisticated co-pilots, they'll say, well, it doesn't always work well because it's still learning. And, some people abandon it or they try it and it doesn't work. So if you can create that community of practice as well to share lessons learned and best practices, you can really amplify the performance and the return on investment that you get of technology. So that's kind of on the business side. On the so making sure HR is upskilling and creating that digital organization. I think then HR people have to not be afraid to try some of these very specific HR technologies themselves. I was playing with we have Microsoft 365 Copilot, and now the big thing is these AI agents. So these are assistants. They have something for free called a career coach, but you can, without having to know how to code or program, you can build your own AI agents now that will perform services. And I think what I would encourage HR learning and development leaders to do is to play with some of this. Don't be afraid. Try it. You're not going to break anything. Probably won't crash your whole system. It's okay. But to really stay up to date on how the technology can help you within your function and experiment. I think that's a really important thing. And again, I think historically, HR has maybe been a little afraid of technology because it's kind of the opposite of the HR world. We deal with people, not the robot side of it. But I think we have to get there. And I love it hearing the stories from people I talk to that they say, oh, we tried it. We made a chatbot and now it's doing this for me. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, our research we did around Gen AI and how it's being used in organizations and their readiness for it, and also how they are investing. And it's interesting, we looked at HR readiness, and only 62% of organizations believe their HR teams are ready and confident for future adoption and embracing Gen AI. However, 73% of organizations plan to invest in technology. So I think that, again, you see what a huge, and we have more data, but I can't share all the data here today. I mean, it just, it's so interesting though. But if you think about the magnitude of how organizations are investing in these technologies, and yet their readiness for them is just not quite there. So, we really need to figure out ways to help them be more ready. In testing and experimenting, we can't be afraid either. We have to kind of learn through trial and error at times. But there's a huge opportunity to really help the HR and learning organization to be better equipped to support these new technologies that our organizations are investing in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I like to talk to senior HR leaders about is the fact that, we live in a world now where organizational performance is driven by two things. And HR gets paid to drive performance, right? They don't get paid to just increase knowledge. It's about applying skills and driving performance. So we've got the people side of it with the CHRO and the HR team. And then on the IT side, you've got the CIO who's paid to drive performance using technology. But now that things are so intertwined, like, do we really need both of those roles, or do we need a chief performance officer who can look at both of the sides of it, what the people can do, what the technology can do, and make the decisions about who does what? We're probably far from that. We need both of those roles now. But one of the gaps that we do see in the market is the relationship between HR and IT doesn't tend to be strong in many places. So very transactional often in nature. IT comes to HR when they need to find, certain skill set from a technology perspective. HR goes to IT when they need to implement or update their HRIS. But we really need, I think, a lot more collaboration between those two, right from the strategic planning point of things. So good discussions, and I would love to see at some point if we aligned KPIs. So imagine user adoption if the IT and the HR had both the same metrics, right? User adoption, user satisfaction with the tools that are being driven, low incidence of cybersecurity issues as you launch new things. But the groups are measured on very, very different things. So I think if we can try and find ways to bring those two teams together, organizations can make some good progress. And I spoke once at a CHRO conference, and afterwards a woman came up to me. She was from a global insurance company. She said, the best tip I got from you is that the CIO should be my best relationship. And I'm going to go and I'm going to build that relationship with my CIO, because I think it's really important, not just to make decisions, but to keep on your radar what's coming from an HR tech stack, right? To know the types of things and make sure that IT understands the problems that you might want to solve, so that they can also keep an eye out for what could be useful within the HR function.
Yeah, it's so critical. And I don't think, in the past, I think that was the biggest challenge for HR, to get a seat at the table at times, but I think it was overlooked. However, I don't think that they had the right support or the right development in having the right conversations. Not all. Some are very good and very savvy. And, I've been around a lot of great HR leaders that really get the business. And, some of them have spent time in the business, and that also helped because they could apply their experience and they can talk the language, and they had different roles across the different functions of the organization. Some of our research, looking at multi-generations in the workplace, if you kind of take a look at these different generations and be able to distill kind of their thinking and their needs and how that correlates to what the business needs to build and support. And from a technology standpoint, that also gives you a competitive advantage, is being able to understand your generations and then be able to cross-train them or give different experiences across different functions to be more competitive in the future. And the risk is, if we don't do this, then we're going to lack innovation. We're going to lack the ability to attract and retain talent, and we're going to be at risk, across multi different facets of what, from a talent and HR people standpoint.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a really important part to equip people with those right skills. The other side of it, and where I find it really interesting to do work, is to make sure that the processes are in place to make good decisions about what technology to invest in and how to innovate with it. Because again, I spent a lot of time out talking and with CEOs specifically on this one, on innovation. And I'll say, you need a process. And I get kind of poo-pooed all the time saying, oh no, innovation should be organic. It should just bubble up. But we know that best in class have a process for innovation. They have a way to keep their pipeline full, because we know 70% of innovation ideas don't work. They have a way to pick the right ones, the ones that are going to deliver business value. They have stage gates to make sure that they can kill ideas, and that they can accelerate development, and then take something that might be really cool and put it into maybe an older, more traditional business. And we see this a lot in financial services, that they've got this very cool tech startup wing, and they come up with all of these different good things in this innovation hub, and they throw it over the wall to the big bank with hundreds of thousands of people, and they say, we don't do those things here. So we're doing a lot of work on what I call operationalizing the growth mindset, because you can have that process, but like you said, you need the skills as well. And a lot of people talk about growth mindset, and that's, yes, you need to be able to want to do things differently, but the reality is there's a whole bunch of supporting skills that go with being able to spot the right opportunities, to make good decisions around which ones you invest in, to get past the cognitive biases, to say, hey, you know what, we tried this and it didn't work, so we're going to stop, because we can take the rest of our resources and the people and invest in something else. So that operationalizing a growth mindset is a really hot topic right now, especially in markets where we feel we might be turning a little bit with a decline potential. I don't want to say the R word, but slower growth, let's just say that. And organizations are looking to unlock that kind of creative thinking, I think.
And with innovation, I think you made a good point too. There's all different ways to cultivate innovation and creativity, and you do have to have some structure around it, or some channels, or some collaboration, and have more of a way to capture the thinking and to then make decisions and to test that thinking. However, innovation doesn't always necessarily have to be the newest technology or the newest thing necessarily. It could be something that you've been doing for quite some time, but you've had a unique way of driving greater success, or driving faster sales, or reduction in production. So, thinking about innovation could be multi different, levels of what
Absolutely.
innovation can be. And we ask this a lot in our awards applications, how is this innovative or innovation? I think sometimes people get stuck that we're always looking for the newest technology. And that's
Yeah.
not necessarily the case. We're just looking to see what's been successful. And, banking and insurance and highly regulated industries, they're not always ahead of the curve, because they really have to work within their constraints of their mandates and their regulations and politics and government and economics. So there's a lot that restricts them. So it's really cool to see when they have pivoted, or they are experiencing a great success. That's innovative. How did you achieve that?
Absolutely, yeah. And when we teach innovation, we talk about that. Like some innovation is very small I innovation. Like think, and I use this is old, very old, to show my age, but it's a perfect example. Like if you think of a cookie making company, and we only used to, a long time ago when I went to school, we only had big cookies, like normal size cookies. And then at a certain point, there was a trend in the market where everyone was becoming much more health conscious. And a lot of the CPG companies said, how can we sell to this health conscious consumer? Well, we can make those little snack packs with little tiny cookies in them. And that's innovation, right? Because it allowed you to break into a whole new market, health conscious consumers. Now, moms or dads who made lunches also really liked it, right? That was a secondary, but it doesn't have to be something big. It can be something big that changes your industry, like, the way that we now, instead of taking taxis, travel, or and instead of staying in hotels. But very little innovation takes place at that level, or at completely changing the world, like a smartphone. A lot of it is down at that, what we call incremental, and there's still a lot of value in it, for sure. But you need to have the right people with the right skills. You need those processes, and it's really interesting. Some of the most fascinating work that I've ever done. I had a chance to collaborate with a group of professors from University College of London in the UK, and they had come up with an assessment to test for entrepreneurial potential. And they were using it with private equity companies to say, should we give you our money? Is this founder going to be able to grow the business? And I said to them at a certain point, I'd really like this for people who work in an organization. And we know that the skill set's different because, like you said, you got these big, lots of bureaucracy constraints. You can't go crazy on a risk management. You've got a board of directors governing you. So they made another version of the assessment that really did look for the potential for that. We called it the good disruptive talent, people who could come in to an organization, spot opportunities for incremental or breakthrough innovation, but work nicely with people to move those ahead, right? And work in the constraints of that big organization. Now, what we found was that wasn't enough. The organization had to be ready for them, and there were a lot of things that had to be in place for that to work as well. But this is all part of the being in the digital era, right? Because a lot of innovation is driven by technology now. So cookies aside, there is a lot you can do from a technology perspective as well. And I think, the more that we can encourage and that HR can get involved in leading that way for, that experimentation, I think that we're going to be in good shape to drive and create some new value.
Yeah, and the more that we can create more experiential events or experiences where we are learning from each other, we're sharing information, and then also being able to then build from there, create actions from these events so that they don't just die there, but, bring back what you've learned, or have a platform that you can continue to connect and to share and to build from. So I think that's really important and can be exciting for those that are really kind of doing this and above to create and to
Absolutely.
foster
Yeah.
these.
And it's not just
environments.
HR leaders. Like I think all business leaders have to take that responsibility for almost being the chief technology officer for their own function, and thinking of ways to use technology to drive that incremental value. One of the things that's been really successful with the team that I work with is we do something called Friday Learning Fun. We're a virtual team across Canada, and we used to try those. Thursday, come and tell me what's going on with your cat or your child's soccer team, and nobody wanted to come. So we decided to build
How did
culture. We
you?
would get together once a month on a Friday, and we would just learn how to use a technology tool and experiment with it. And when we do our engagement surveys, it's the number one thing that people like, because we're all learning, to, let's say, use a Microsoft Teams whiteboard, or create our avatar so that we can go into the virtual workspace and roast a marshmallow or play cornhole together. And it's really fun because you hear people saying things like, I can't find my cursor, or where did my screen go, or that, all the things that you would expect when people are learning about technology. But we're having fun together, and we're learning to be digital. And it's even something as simple like that all business leaders can lean into, and just play with technology makes a really big difference, from opening up people's minds to doing things differently. And we like building those types of fun things and technology into learning programs that we develop, because we're finding more and more, even with the sales training that we do, sales are really looking for ways to use generative AI to write better communications, or to go through the data to see which leads that they should be following up on. So more and more our traditional, even classroom or virtual training, is incorporating some of the technologies. Not that we're teaching people specifically a lot about the technology, but we're building it in as far as it's something that can help accelerate your so that's been a fun evolution for us as well.
That sounds like a really great approach to bringing you together in a remote environment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's worked well.
that's very cool, especially to learn. And it's interesting, even small organizations, you'd be surprised how many technologies and tools that they use. Never mind these large global organizations, they're using, so many technologies in different departments, and to really be able to optimize it better is it's something that I think we can all get better at, because there's again, a lot out there, but there's a lot of useful tools that can make our jobs better, can make us more efficient, and so we just need to put the right process in place to be able to share and to test and to communicate. One of the sessions that I love we have is around innovation ourselves, and we invite different organizations to share innovations around gamification, around ideation, from big concepts to just really kind of around process. One good example, we had McKinsey and Consulting had, it was a very simple approach around nudging. And they use this, it's really for marketing, but they use this for their consultants to really kind of help simplify their approach and build that into their training, little nudges and reminders. And so it really kind of helped them scale. This was a couple of years ago. I'm just kind of remembering kind of the big picture, but it stuck in my mind. It was an approach that's been around forever, used in a different type of environment, but then crossed over into the learning environment to then drive greater results. So, stuff like that is so interesting, I find, and so helpful for businesses and for,
Yeah. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be always high tech. We had one client that we were working with, and they didn't have a learning management system, but we're looking for some ways to sustain. What we designed was an actual, and it was a sales training, designed a QR code challenge, where we gave people a series of things, for 6 weeks after the training, and they had to scan a QR code each week and just report into their results. It was super low tech, but it was a way to gather data and to make sure that people were applying what they learned, and it had great success. So, to your point, sometimes the small things can make a real difference. It doesn't have to be, a big fancy technology implementation, but just some good ideas to drive things based on the scenario or the constraints that you have in your organization. Right? It's amazing if you kind of think outside the box how you can be creative and come up with some good ideas. So
it can be kind of fun too.
Yeah, it is fun.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else you'd like to share as you're looking or going into the summer here? We're kind of wrapping up the first quarter, or what? We're kind of into the second quarter
I
already. And
know.
if you're organized like that at your organization, but it's going fast.
It is going fast. It's hard to believe it's May tomorrow. The only thing I would say, Rachel, is just really encourage people to be curious and courageous, with this learning. Technology changes so fast. The technology we use at work, we have to find a way to keep up and, follow one of the tech vendors on YouTube, or there's a whole bunch of creators on YouTube who do nothing but create content on, here's what's new in Teams or Google Meets or whatever it is. I just encourage people to take the initiative and lead with that, because it makes a difference if we can all start to work on our own digital mindsets and skill sets.
Absolutely. And our team has been speaking very highly of you and your team, and we're looking forward to collaborating on more projects together this year. So welcome also to being one of our partners on the provider side, preferred provider side. So again, welcome to our team. And it's been great chatting with you today. And hopefully today we're here virtual, which is great, but maybe sometime we'll see you in person here at one of our events in the near
That sounds
future.
great. Thanks for having me.
Bye, Michelle. Bye.